When a foreign nation uses military or intelligence resources and tools against an American executive or corporation to obtain trade secrets or sensitive business information for the benefit of its state-owned companies, we must say enough is enough.
That was U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder announcing criminal charges against 5 Chinese military officials for cyber espionage. Well, joining us now from Los Angeles to discuss Monday's action is Whiton. He's a former U.S. State Department official during the George W. Bush administration and the current president of the Hamilton Foundation, a Los Angeles-based think tank. Here in Washington is the director of the Kissinger Institute on China and the United States, Robert Daly. And joining us from New York is the director of the China National Association of International Studies, Victor Gao. Gentlemen, thanks to all of you for joining us. Victor, let me start with you. China has expressed anger and rejected these accusations. Will we be seeing more of a forceful response from China?
Well, first of all, I think the whole world and the international community have a great interest in safeguarding security on the cyberspace, and China included. However, the U.S. decision, as announced today, is very counterproductive. China has already strongly denied the allegation and also condemned the U.S. accusation. And also, very unfortunately, China broke off the China-U.S. dialogue on cybersecurity, which was actually established in the Sunnydale summit between President Xi Jinping and President Obama in California, Sunnyland, last year. So this is a very unfortunate thing. Now, on the other hand, if you look at the accusation of the United States against so-called 5 Chinese military officers, these accusations actually pale significantly in contrast to what Edward Snowden has revealed to the whole world. So I would say if the rest of the world follows exactly the tactic or the logic of the United States, then Germany could sue the United States, Brazil could sue the United States, so many other countries can sue the United States for what Edward Snowden has very convincingly informed the rest of the world. This is not productive at all. I think China and the United States need to work together to come up with a framework so that the rest of the world can willingly participate, so that we will have a better way to deal with cyber attack, hacking, and better ensure security on the cyberspace collectively.
Okay, Victor. Robert, let me get your take on this. We heard Victor Gao there talking about this being very unfortunate, but is this a major setback, you think?
We'll have to see how it develops. It is unfortunate, but thinking back to what your reporter was saying a little bit earlier, if these are all just spurious lies on the part of the United States, if it is pure nonsense, what would be the United States' motivation for putting forward patently false charges, especially at this time when we're trying to figure out how we're going to have a peaceful relationship with China? We just had a successful visit from the chairman of the Chinese Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Fang Fenghui, last week, and China will be participating in the RIMPAC exercises, the Rim of the Pacific military exercises hosted near Hawaii this summer by the United States. Military-to-military relations have been pretty good. The economic relationship is important. So what do we imagine would be the United States' motivation for inventing charges about China at this time? I'm not sure that holds up.
Okay, let's put that question to Christian. Christian, why do you think the United States made this announcement now? What does it hope to get out of this?
You know, I don't necessarily think the timing was well thought out. I think it's entirely appropriate, and I'd encourage your readers to look through the indictment and look at the very serious accusations therein. But this comes from the Federal Bureau of Investigations. It's not one of the foreign policy setting agencies of the U.S. government. It's noteworthy, however, that the White House and the State Department didn't squash this, didn't halt this, allowed it to go forward, and that Attorney General Holder actually kind of made a big deal of this, didn't just push it off to one of his underlings. So, you know, there is a risk that because of these various serious things that China is going to run out of friends in Washington. But one point as to the allegation that Edward Snowden and what he revealed shows that the United States does something similar to what these 5 officers are accused of. That simply isn't true. Snowden stole thousands and thousands of documents, and not one shows an instance of a U.S. intelligence agency giving commercial trade secrets to a U.S. business for profit.
But the United States did spy on commercial enterprises. I mean, we know that, as our reporter pointed out, it spied on Siemens, it spied on Petrobras in Mexico, it spied on other companies in Mexico, in Brazil rather, as well.
You know, yeah, information is collected for a number of reasons, especially if companies are engaged. You know, if Siemens is building a new weapon system, we probably want to know about it, especially since other governments like Beijing and Russia are probably collecting information on that as well. But it's not like China. You know, if you look at the indictment, there are instances where allegedly state-owned enterprises on the mainland paid the PLA for trade secrets and for creating a network in which to keep what they called commercial espionage. I mean, that would be like General Motors hiring the NSA to steal information on a car manufacturer in China. And, you know, we have a transparent society here.
Right.
Things that are secret eventually work out, and nothing like this has ever come out.
Okay, Robert, but the argument that the United States makes all the time is that it's spying for security purposes. It wants to prevent terrorist attacks. It wants to prevent any kind of attacks against this country and the people of this country.
Right.
Some of the spying doesn't meet that standard, does it?
Well, we don't know what becomes of this intelligence. We don't know how it's used. And obviously, with intelligence of this kind, you want to know as much as you possibly can about as many important sectors as you possibly can, and then you sift it and you make your decisions. I think these revelations, these indictments, are a bit of a game changer in two ways. One, U.S. companies came forward and were willing to be named as having been hacked. And so there's an indication that they now think the United States government has their back and has some ability to defend them. That's new and is worth China taking note of, whether China admits to any wrongdoing or not. And the other indicated change by these indictments is that China has for a long time said, well, of course, the nature of the internet is such that it's impossible to determine where attacks originate, and therefore somehow that proves they can't possibly originate with us. Well, the details of this indictment now say this may have changed and they may know exactly where attacks originate. So again, even from China's own point of view, this is a different atmosphere.
Okay, let me get Victor Gao on this. Victor Gao, we're hearing here that the Americans do this because they want to secure the country, because they want to prevent attacks against the country. They don't do this for economic advantage. You buy that?
Well, first of all, before the Edward Snowden incident broke out, the United States almost crushed China, alleging China of being guilty of all these cybersecurity violations, as if the United States were the saint and angel and China was the victim. Then the Edward Snowden thing broke out, and I would say it, regardless of whatever the United States would believe, the rest of the world has made its conclusion. That is, the United States is guilty in multitude of whatever it is accusing China of. Now, what logic the United States is presenting this time will fail if you ask other countries. For example, if you believe in what Edward Snowden has indicated, then whatever the United States has been doing in Germany, for example, or in Brazil, or in France, in many European countries, are in violation of the laws of those countries. And those countries have a right to go after the United States if they follow the same logic as the United States is doing in this particular case. Therefore, I think the one interpretation is the United States want to capture the so-called moral high ground after the devastating blow from the Edward Snowden case. But I would highly doubt that the rest of the world will buy this kind of a projection by the United States. The better way to deal with this is for China and the United States to sit down and through diplomacy, through constructive engagement, come up with a better way to deal with all these problems.
Okay.
If China and the United States constantly keep themselves at each other's throat, the world will be worse off rather than
Victor,
better.
I want to get the view here from Robert. You wanted to say something?
I think that's both. There's some truth in that, but I also think that it is a bit of a smokescreen. And one of the important differences is that when the Snowden allegations came out, the United States busted, sort of fessed up and said, yes, we do indeed do this. But China, even with evidence laid before the world, says, no, we would never do such a thing. And even in private dialogues, we say we want to have a dialogue with China, and we certainly do. And I would agree with Mr. Gao that that's where this should be, that we should be having dialogues. But if even in private dialogues presented with irrefutable evidence, China denies them, this is going to be a rather one-sided dialogue. Where can you start if evidence isn't viewed as evidence? The United States did these things, it admits them.
Yeah, I think the other point he was making as well is that the United States also does it, but is not admitting to it as well. We will continue with this. We're going to have to take a break right now. Stay with us. We'll have more with our panel right after this. You're watching The Heat.